Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this December amazing podcast for Beacon of Light Podcasts. Tonight, I am broadcasting from Kyle, Texas, and Ivette Lee is my very special guest, and we're so excited to have her here tonight. And she hails all the way over from California. I'm down here in Texas, and we're going to go all across the world here to share a message that's really interesting and I would say needed at this time, so we have an understanding and clarity on what's happening. How can we understand, oh, that's different than what this is? Now, that's really general. I haven't even really said much because I want Ivette to really share everything tonight. So, Ivette, tell us where you're broadcasting from this evening.
Well, I am in the Central Valley of California, so Fresno, California.
Excellent. And how is it out there in California? You guys still steady? What's happening?
It's a little chilly today, so we've definitely have dropped in some degrees. You know, California, of course, especially the Central Valley, we've had some sunny days, and then another day it can be very chilly. So I never take out and put away my summer clothes, t-shirts, because it goes back and forth. But today is a little chilly. It's definitely feeling more fall and Christmas. So looking forward to that.
Excellent. It does help when the weather kind of sets it up for you, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it is a great thing. Well, welcome, Ivette. Today, if you can see scrolling underneath there, tell us where you're from, everybody who's popping in here with comments, anything like that. Because if you can read what the title is, this is my good friend, Ivette, who has written a book that's probably going to be a little bit different. So share with us the title of your book, Ivette.
Well, The Satan Model, Exposing the Link Between Serial Killers and Satan. So it's a fascination that we all have, you know, with serial killers. And so I definitely wanted to include another individual that needs to be talked about and needs to be exposed and is a huge, if not the contributing factor to serial crime.
Agreed with all of that. And there's a lot of things to discuss with how he is pretty sneaky about going about all of this. So whether you believe that there is Satan, the devil, whatever it is that you call it, tonight's discussion is going to be about that. So maybe you will see some interesting parts. And when we talk about one, we have to understand that in the opposition of all things, if there is a ton of darkness, then we know that there's going to be amazing light because that opposition causes the balance. So it's good to understand what it is that we're fighting against so that we really can make the difference and make good choices. Because Ivette and I, we both believe that we are here on earth to make choices. We have the agency to do this. And through choices, you know, your life can be really, amazing. It doesn't mean that challenging things won't happen. Of course they will. That's the part of life, but our response, our understanding, and how to get through it is definitely a different way. So with this exposing, you know, the Satan model and what's happening in this correlation and comparison, this link with serial killers, I'm kind of interested, Ivette, like what would draw you to such a topic?
Well, you know, I've always, since a young teenager in high school, I've just always had a fascination with human behavior. And you remember those college career days where they would set you up to profile you and see what matched you, your personality. And so mine was always, every year, was psychology. And of course, helping others and helping others through their mental illness was always something that I really wanted to go into as a career choice. But as I grew older and had more experiences, I really had a fascination with human behavior and why people did the things that they did, specifically heinous or criminal. And so I ended up taking a course in my college days at Fresno State University that was called The Psych of Crime. And that was during the time where we had a huge burst of serial killer series, TV series, serial killer movies, and where everybody wanted to be a profiler. They wanted to go into school to become a profiler.
And what does that mean? I don't mean to interrupt you right there, but what does a profiler mean?
So the actual position isn't real. A profiler isn't an actual position. It's more of a criminal psychology or a criminologist. But the series would have an individual that became a profiler, and they would be able to understand the psyche of an individual that was committing crimes. And so through their crimes and forensics, this person was able to identify what type of victimology they had, why they were doing the things they were doing, when they were going to strike back. So they were able to understand the killer's mindset by looking at the crimes, the investigation and probing of the crime scene, and then coming up with a profile. You know, are they Caucasian? What race are they? What age are they? And all these identifying markers was the study of the profiler.
Yeah, wow, very fascinating. And so you've had this draw to look at all of these things, and it pulls you in. Why do you think that is?
So when I took that course in Psych of Crime, at the same time I was doing my master's in counseling. And so this professor, it was well-renowned, national renowned, Dr. Scrappick, and she had already interviewed famous, notorious killers like Ed Kemper, Jeffrey Dahmer, and she laid out a slide presentation, and it had all of the cases. She specifically spoke about each case and what their crimes were, and I was hooked. I wanted to study why those same individuals did what they did. And so that took me on this journey of research, took me on the journey of wanting to correspond with serial killers, wanting to probe their psyche and find out through interviews and correspondence, and also talking to the foremost professionals in the field, FBI agents, the FBI behavioral unit, and Dr. Hickey, who actually did my foreword, is a well-renowned, nationally renowned criminologist and professor of criminology here at Fresno State, now at Walden University. But I wanted to be him. And so he took me under his wing, and he has already published his own books on serial crime and traveled the world talking and doing symposiums on serial crime. And so I kind of took that same journey and wanted to do what he was doing. And so he accepted my proposal and accepted my theory, which was the Satan model theory. And because he's also he was a member of the church, he understood the spiritual aspect. And because the scientific world doesn't really talk about the spiritual aspect, he didn't necessarily open up in his own books about evil and about Satan. But I wanted to take that challenge, and that's where the Satan model was born.
Wow. So what in your research, I mean, like, Lori, this is very fascinating, because I think many of us have questions. I know, okay, I got to say this in the right way. When I observe my children, they're not serial killers, okay? But when I observe my children and their behaviors, I do, what were they thinking? Why did they do that, right? The logic of things, I'm like, come on, you know better. I taught you better. Like, what's going on here, right? You just have this idea and thinking, well, they know these things. These choices here are so much better. How did that happen, right? We kind of get confused. Again, none of my children are serial killers. I just had to throw that out there. You know, maybe I better say it like this. All my children are right? They're normal. Okay. Anyway, yeah, that whole point is like, wow, I think a lot of us ask those questions of why, especially when we hear such just heinous crimes, we're asking why. And so you took that why, went into the research, and tried to link things together. Am I right? Lori says, I've always been interested in criminal psychology, but it can be so dark, and it's just so much to delve into. So, okay, before I let's finish this question or this idea that Lori presents, and then I'm going to ask my other question. So, how do you, in studying this, because of the heinous amount of just what their behavior has been doing to other human beings, how do you not just get swallowed up in that darkness? Ivette, what happens?
I think for me, I don't necessarily work in the field. I don't work with law enforcement, and they're the ones that actually see true evil. They see the crime scenes. And so that is a world that the public doesn't see. And so it is affecting, it is impactful. And many law enforcement agents, criminologists who are in the works, in the trenches, see that dark side, and they have to go to counseling. They have to be able to decompartmentalize it in order to stay sane themselves. My research has been kind of in the background, and in talking to serial killers and corresponding with them and seeing the images through my research and reading the things that they write about, which can be very dark and evil. Because I have an understanding of those origins, and because I have a very strong foundation of my church beliefs and I have a strong spiritual foundation, that helps me to be able to research, read, and kind of dissect all of these things that are happening in this dark world. And also because this is important when you're interviewing serial killers and corresponding with them, that you have to build a relationship with them. You can't see them as, even though you know that they committed heinous crimes, but you can't just think of them as this evil person, because we know that they weren't born that way. At least in my theory, the Satan model, I talk about the origin of evil, and that we are not born, as maybe the scientific world would say, that there is a aggressive gene, or that some can be born with evil in them. I disagree. I believe that we are all born with the light of Christ, and through our journey in life, that can take a different course through trauma, environmental factors, conditions that affect an individual, abuses of sexual nature or physical nature, mental illness such as personality disorders can affect an individual. And then also, when you think about the origins of evil, there's a factor that really hasn't been talked about, and that's where my research came in, that we have a choice. And when we make these choices that are in line with light, we start going down this path of darkness. And that darkness can then turn into wickedness. And then that wickedness turns into heinous crimes. And then we see a murder, or we see the most heinous things, the most evil persons committing acts against others.
Yeah, that is. So you're saying that this is a choice, that one choice leads to the next, that leads on their spiral down. It's not just one time, one choice, all of a sudden you're this way. They've been small choices that have slowly started to lead them away from that light, and slowly started to dim their things. Now, there could have been an event that would be really traumatic, which adds to those comparisons, because if you've only known unhealthy places, why would you choose healthy? Because you don't know it. It could even be fearful because it's not comfortable, even though it's not healthy. So there's a lot of those kind of factors in, but still ultimately you have choices. So what's been some pushback on that?
There really hasn't been a lot of, I know I've spoken with individuals, on a personal basis, who may not believe in the paranormal, or who may not believe that Satan, how does Satan really influence us? Well, in my book, I talk about an experience that I had that I was able to witness demons. I had an experience where I saw them for myself. And I think that I had that experience, and it was only one time, so that I could testify in my book that they are real. And you put that together with the interviews I've had and the correspondence, like Ted Bundy talked about how he felt this energy. He felt evil. And when he was being interviewed by a detective, it was her first case. This was when he was on death row. And she had interviewed him before. She knew of him. He was very charming, very articulate. And this one instance, when she sat down to talk to him before he was executed, she said that she physically saw him turn dark. His blue eyes turned dark. His skin started to darken. And she said for the first time that she was scared of him. And so these are experiences where there is possession, right? Possession of someone that has made choices that aren't in line with God. So there can be pushback. For instance, the field of psychology. If you can't testify in court and prove, then there is no backing. The criminology world, the psychology world doesn't want to use that theory because you can't prove it. So that's the pushback that would make the most sense. But we understand that not everything that is truth is necessarily backed up by evidence, at least scientific evidence. But there is other forms of truth. There's testimony. There's experiences that these killers are talking about it themselves. They are saying we need to hear them because they're the ones that are doing these things. They would know more than anyone else what is evil, what is the feeling that I feel when I'm committing these dark crimes. And Berkowitz said that himself. He said, I felt controlled by something. And so we need to talk more about those things. Why are they saying this? They're saying it out of their own mouths. This is their personal experiences. And so I think the more we push, and this is my goal, the more I push to expose that side, that this is a truth, then maybe people will understand, okay, well, how did this happen? Where did it begin? And how can we prevent it? Can we prevent evil? Well, in my theory, I say, no, we cannot prevent evil. It'll always be around as long as Satan is around. But we know, as you mentioned earlier, April, that there's opposition in all things. And if there's darkness, there's light. And we know that God is light. And so as he's building up his kingdom, so is Satan. And that's why we're seeing a lot of the spirit of contention is stirring, because Satan is stirring hatred in us and anger and division. And with these serial killers who were not evil at one point, they became that way, right? In a gradual process. Well, when we start to, and my Satan model theory is like a spectrum. So you have light when we start out in the beginning with light. Then at the other end is darkness, complete outer darkness. So we start here, and as we make choices or certain situations happen to us, and then we make choices, we start to get angry. Let's say we have trauma and we feel hurt, and maybe we feel angry, and we lash out at those that have hurt us, or we lash out at someone else because we're hurt inside due to our trauma, or poverty or addiction. It could be all these things, right? We make choices and we start to move along this spectrum, through our own choices. Can we go back? Yes, absolutely. And that's called repentance or understanding that, oh, I don't want to become a criminal, or I don't want to, I got to go to mental health and do something good to heal my own hurts, right? But there's individuals who that hurt and anger, they can't fix it themselves. So that anger starts to stir in them. And then guess who comes into the picture during those moments? It's Satan. And that's how he influences us little by little by tempting us to continue festering that anger. And then when we have that anger, we lash out in our own ways, right? Whether it's through drug addiction or alcoholism or abusing someone else. And so Satan wants to stir that and feed that. And if we allow it through our free agency and our choices, then he can possess us. And so why does he have that ability and that influence? Because Satan does not have a body himself. And so because he was not given a body, he and his followers, which we have an understanding biblically through that 1/3 that followed him and his spirits want to possess our bodies. And so when they possess us, that's when we become as heinous and dark and murderous and lustful and do all of those things that you see in these crimes. And so Jeffrey Dahmer, a notorious killer, was, I would say, the most transparent, vulnerable, and open about all of his crimes. And he said that, he was a young boy, a great family, and he started to notice some isolation and felt depressed. He was alone, kind of shy at school in his elementary years. And then as he got older, his parents were having some marital issues, and they were always fighting. And so that caused him to isolate, and it would cause him anger that his parents were arguing, and he didn't know. He's a little boy. He didn't know what to do. How could he fix it? So he felt this loss of control over his home environment. So for him, he would go out into the woods to seek solace, to be able to control something. And so he started to feed into his own depression by making choices. And so what he would do is he would find animals, and he would dissect them out of curiosity. And he did this because he said that he felt this sense of control, because he had no control in his own family, in his own home. No control. He didn't know what to do with his thoughts. So now he's still an innocent boy, right? He's young. As he grew older, and this is a critical developmental stage for all of us, all humans. But these serial killers have talked about this critical age of 14 during these prepubescent years where they're coming into their sexuality. And if there's any type of trauma during that period, that can lead to distortion, could lead to abnormal sexual fantasies. It could lead to just a huge array of issues. And Dahmer and others like him talk about this period of time where they start to become obsessed with their own fantasies. And so when we have a loss of control in the real world, we go to the fantasy world. And so these serial killers start fantasizing about what they want to do. And so Dahmer, he wanted to control these animals and dissect them, and he felt like he had some control doing that. Well, when we start to feed those fantasies and become obsessed with them, then we go on to the spectrum where we start to become addicted. And that's when Satan knows our addictions and our weaknesses, and he plays on that. And he kind of stirs you, keep thinking about that, go do that, and that's what Dahmer did. He went from, when we have these immense fantasies and we feed them and we think about them constantly, then we can no longer hold it in and we have to act on it. And that is a choice when we act on it. And so these serial killers act on their fantasy, and that's when they become a murderer, a killer. And so Jeffrey Dahmer, this whole time, he knew that it was wrong to kill his victims. And he talks about how was he able to objectify them, to be able to see them less than a person, because that addiction was so strong, that fantasy was so strong, and the compulsion was so strong that anything else, morals, values, his religion, because his family was very religious and they believed in the Bible, went out the door, because that strong need to fulfill his own pleasures, his own fantasies took over. And that can only happen when Satan influences us and then possesses our mind, our body, because we've essentially opened the door through our choices.
Yes. In opening the door through our choices, that's why we have to be so careful. Mm-hmm. You hear the little sayings like idle hands or the devil's workshop, prune your thoughts at all times. You hear these kinds of things. Why? Because we really all know deep down, if you're thinking about something long enough, you're going to do it. Mm-hmm. We know if you've been thinking about the ice cream all day long, that's sitting there at home, that you're probably going to get home and you're going to still be thinking about it, and then you're going to eat the whole bucket of ice cream because you've been thinking about it and thinking about it. I mean, that's that's something kind of light and silly, but it's the truth. How many of us have a thought, and if we don't prune it right then, it's going to continue. And the pruning is a choice. Mm-hmm. We don't control what pops in, but we control if we take it right out.
Right.
That's
the subliminal messages that we see on TV, right? That pop up.
Yep.
That can influence us or tempt us. And that's how Satan works. He just tells you, whispers and influences you through these messages that we see all around us. Oh, here you go. Here's just a little thing, take it. It's not a big deal. But once we take it and we like it, then we want more. And if we feed it, then it can grow bigger. And then what happens when it grows bigger? We may not be able to control it. Now we're out of control and we become addicted to it. And now we're going to need help in order to overcome it. Yes. And so when we feed to our lust, and especially those that have become murderers, they have this lust for blood because it is power and it is control of another human being. That is the ultimate desire in people, to have a sense of control and power. And so serial killers ultimately kill because that is the highest beacon of attaining power and control over someone else's life. And even serial killers that didn't want to kill, but they couldn't help themselves, because once you get that lust of blood and Satan is in you, because that is of Satan. Those things are of Satan. It becomes you. You become wicked.
Yeah, I'm thinking about with Cain and Abel, right? There were just certain little thoughts, right, that started to tempt Cain, and look at your brother. Gosh, he gets everything. You don't get anything. They're very sly. They're very subtle. That's one thing that we have to remember, is that this constant watchman on the tower, the constant pruning of our thoughts, that's the work. That's the war we're in. That's that part that, in order for our light to stay bright and directed and connected with God, we have to constantly be aware of this. And you and I know, reading daily our scriptures, praying daily, what we call like the Sunday school answers, right? Read your scriptures, say your prayers. Yeah, because it works. Because when you are connected with the light, it just pushes out like anything, if you're in a dark room and you turn on the light, light pushes away the darkness.
Mm-hmm.
And so every day that you're reading, that you're praying, that you're, serving and helping others, that's pushing it away, pushing it away, pushing it away. And it is protection for you. Anytime that we entertain one thought, entertain another,
Yeah.
maybe just one more, maybe just a little bit more, we are adrift from that connection. But there's always hope, right? You said that there's kind of that part that's really critical, that if they make the choices before that part to start to go back, if they have support of a family, of friends, the worst thing we can do, and okay, so Harry Potter nerd for just a minute, right? When Luna gives this little speech to Harry, he said, if I wanted to be in control over you and wanted to, make you feel the worst ever, I would separate you from all of your friends. I would separate you from all of the light. I would put you in that feeling of being alone and that desire to be alone, because you usually don't make poor choices when you're with others, unless they're all making poor choices together. But you know what I'm saying? That idea of accountability, if there's someone there, it's pretty tough. And I like that the definition of integrity is that you can be alone in the room and keep choosing the right without somebody right there. Then you have someone that's filled with integrity. Those that are struggling with that is good. They're away. Gonna grab the ice cream, grab the bag of chips mom said not to, or whatever, right? And we laugh at the chips, we laugh at the ice cream. It all starts with those little things, those little prunings, and you have to do that. Lori says, resist the devil and he will flee from you. Absolutely. And she says, we have a choice to continue on the dark path or to turn away toward the light of Christ. Yeah, exactly. And she also mentioned, this concept of you deserve it. You need it. It's okay. Just one time, right? There are always these little things that lead to the next, to the next, to the next.
Right. Well, when you were talking about Cain, he made an oath with Satan, because Satan told him, I will give you power if you do this. So they made a promise with each other. Okay, I will kill Abel if you give me power. And he believed him, and he listened to him more than he listened to God, because God was also communicating with him. But what happened, we know this in the story of Cain, that he was his lamb was rejected. And so what happens with us when we feel rejected? We get angry, right? Or we become envious of someone else that maybe is getting more attention. So that starts to stir anger. And so because of that anger that was visible, Satan came into the picture and tempted him and then influenced him. And then they made a pact. Well, the same thing happened with David Berkowitz, who was a serial killer from the Bronx in New York. And, he led a very lonely life, found out later in his years that he was adopted, and that really confused his identity. And so he had some other issues there too, some contributing factors. But because of his isolation and because of his antisocial behavior, he decided, okay, I need to find some friends. I'm feeling alone in this world. And so that this is a choice. He found some friends in the wrong area, which happened to be a cult. And so because that was where he found friends, he decided to join them in what they were doing. And so that turn of events altered his life, because he made some pacts and some oaths in this cult to go and kill people. And so this started his murderous spree in New York, in the Queens. So he started killing people. Well, when he was arrested, he confessed, I shouldn't have listened to the devil. The devil lied to me. So later down the road, he talks about how the devil promised him power. And so he had this power for a while, right? During his murderous sprees, he felt power and control by killing others. But did he really have power and endless power that he was promised by Satan? No, it's only temporary. And so he felt, in his interviews, he felt betrayed by that. He really believed in Satan, that he would have all these things. And now he's probably one of the only few serial killers that has truly turned his life around, has literally gone from darkness to light again. And he's now preaching in prison. And you can see his countenance is very different from when he entered the jail system. Now he talks and he professes the Bible, and he professes God, that anyone can change no matter how low they get, no matter how wicked they become, that if they turn to God, they can receive that light again. And there, you don't see that many serial killers who are ready for that have that accountability, that have that remorse. And every case is different, but deep down in my own correspondence with them and in research, I have felt that they know right from wrong, that they understand that. And deep down, no matter how angry they are or the injustices that they have felt and want to turn and lash out at society, deep down, they still want to feel loved. They still want to feel accepted by somebody. They still yearn for a mother or a father to have accepted them, and if they would just allow themselves to a little bit of that light, right, and have that understanding that they can be free of that. But most serial killers that I have talked to also don't believe in God or Satan, but that comes from the perspective of, I've been wronged in this world, so why do I believe in God? He's also abandoned me. Not only did my mom or my dad or others that abused me abandon me, but God has also abandoned me. And that's the perspective that many of them have. And so they don't believe in a God or in Satan. But if they can hide their crimes and they're master manipulators, they have an understanding and knowledge of what evil is and what good is.
Yeah, that they really do. Because we're born with the light of Christ, there is always that options of right and wrong. And when we make those choices based on the little choices that became bigger and bigger, we do have to be careful. And so this is a good warning for anyone to remember that, it just takes that little bit and then that little bit more. And whatever we're tempted with, like you said, Satan knows our weaknesses and knows where to get us. And, I know many of mine and been working on and through those, because our weaknesses can become our strengths. We can do that, again, choices and working through. But if we always play that victim or, life has wronged me, if we stay there, then, it's a pretty hopeless place. Mm-hmm. So very, very interesting. And Satan would love to have us there. And like you said, we know that Satan will never receive this body. And his whole goal is to make sure that you destroy yours and to destroy as many as possible. And in the end, he just laughs because he doesn't get to take your body. No, but he's, by dang, he's not going to let anybody get that beyond. And, drugs, alcohol, addiction, pornography, all of it that leads back down into killing. Right. All of these things, he's just laughing in the end, no matter whatever promises that he makes with them, whatever pact, whatever promise, whatever oath, whatever covenant. It's always based on a sandy foundation that will crumble. And when he takes them down with him and laughs, that's a tragedy, right?
Right.
Because we're all born with the light of God within us. So very good. Thank you, Yvette, so much. Very fascinating. So I guess it's just in one more of those testimonies, especially during this time, that we can make the choices. And when we have that understanding about this is our agency to choose what we will do, then the more we continue to choose God's way, the plan, positivity, light, energy that all comes from that, the more we put him at bay and at bay and at bay. Doesn't mean that he never stops. That's one thing. Like interest, Satan never stops, right? It just constantly is there. So we have to make sure that we have that plan to know how to defeat it. So yeah, Lori,
we have to know his tactics. And if we know what his tactics are, then we also have to do our part, which is to put on that armor of God, right? Put on that shield, put on that helmet, all those protective things that protect us spiritually, and also have that knowledge that he is there and he is ready to wait for you to open that door through sin, through choices. And even though not all people who have traumatic experience and abuse and lead a life of crime means that they're going to become a serial killer, right? But through feeding our choices, whether they're good or bad, if they're bad, and that's where it can grow. And Satan will go along with that and follow you in that road. So as long as we have an understanding that we need to be able to be on alert, on the defense, and combat that, we can prevent ourselves from becoming the most wicked, the most heinous, even a serial killer.
Right. Very, very interesting. Thank you so much. Laura says, yes, this has been really fascinating. This has been interesting. I praise God that Satan will be defeated ultimately. Yes. And let's be on the right side of that defeat. And, life will be really good. You'll have a very Merry Christmas if that's the case. So, everyone, so Ivette, tell us where we can get this book and, what we can do to support some of your things, your programs, anything that you have.
Well, thank you. I appreciate having this opportunity to be on here with you, April. I know that you are constantly on and sharing and helping others, bring their message of light. And so I appreciate that here. My book is also in Barnes & Noble, so you can buy it from there. You can also purchase it on Amazon, Author Central. I have my own page there. You can follow me. I know with COVID right now, a lot of things have been shut down for book signings, but it will come. And also on my Facebook page, author Ivette Lee, I post there, any upcoming events. So hopefully when COVID is over, then we can resume and have some get-togethers. And for now, those pages in Barnes & Noble and Amazon. So feel free. I'd love to have you ask questions on my Facebook page and any interest that you may have.
Thank you so much, Ivette. So you heard it there, her Facebook page, author Ivette Lee, also on Amazon. And you've had it scrolling down here below, the Satan model, so that you can, go ahead and go and grab that, exposing the link between serial killers and Satan. So very, very interesting stuff, because when you know who your enemy is, you know how to defeat him. So that's kind of the whole point of all of this. Crystal says, Merry Christmas, and thank you so much, Crystal, for jumping on here as well. Thank you, everybody. It's been a wonderful evening and very fascinating. So, I'm definitely excited to take up my sword and my shield and make sure that I'm empowering that to my children as well, because when we know the enemy that we're fighting, there's so much, our choices become so much clearer. So thank you again, Ivette.
Thank you.
All right. We'll see you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.